he told me on a Tuesday evening. Not because Tuesday meant anything to him, but he knew what Tuesdays were in our house. He chose one anyway. I do not think he thought about it. That is, in its own way, the whole story. This is that story. I met Daniel when I was 31. I was settled by then, not in a lonely way, but in a quiet, particular way. My own flat. A career I had built over 12 years. Senior nurse, specialist ward. The kind of job that asks everything of you and, if you are honest, you give it willingly because the work is real. My father had died 2 years before and left me something. Not a fortune, but enough to feel, for the first time, genuinely secure. I did not ring-fence it. I did not think I needed to. Daniel was good company. That is not a small thing, and I want to say it clearly. He was warm in a room. He noticed people. When you were talking to him, you felt, for the duration of that conversation, that you were the only person in it. We talked about the future the way people do when they genuinely believe in it. We talked about building something together, and we meant it, and we were right to mean it. Because for a long time, we did build it. When we bought the house, I put some of my father's money toward it. Daniel knew. He thanked me, properly, sitting at that same kitchen table, looking at the floor plan we had printed and spread out between us. I remember it clearly because he meant it. He meant it then. I want to say that clearly, too. His mother, Margaret, lived 40 minutes away. She had arthritis in both knees and in the last few years a lung condition that needed watching, not dramatic, but persistent, the kind that requires keeping on top of. Appointments came up regularly, a consultant every few months, blood tests, GP check-ins, the occasional scan. Daniel worked long hours. There was always a reason it fell to me, and I never made it difficult for him. The first time I filled the thermos from my nursing bag, the one I took on night shifts, and brought Margaret tea for the waiting room. She looked at it and said, "You did not have to do that." I said, "It was no trouble." That was true. For a long time, that was genuinely true. Margaret was good company too, careful, a little dry, not the kind of woman who asked for things. We would sit together in waiting rooms, and she would tell me about the town where Daniel grew up, and I would ask questions, and the time would pass. I was proud of what we had built. I framed it to myself as partnership, investment, love, a shared project. I do not think I was naive, but I cannot be entirely certain of that now. I cannot name a single moment when things changed. That is the honest answer. It was more like a tide going out, slow enough that you keep standing in the same place and only later realize the water is gone. Daniel grew comfortable. I do not mean that cruelly. Comfort is what you build a home for. But there is a kind of comfort that becomes its own architecture, walls and a roof that stop you from noticing the weather. He stopped worrying about things because things were handled. The monthly accounts were managed because I managed them. The shopping was done because I did it on the way back from a shift. The calls to the boiler repair company, the car insurance renewal, Margaret's appointment letters filed and flagged. All of it handled quietly by the same person every time. I had been funding a life he felt entitled to. I do not think he knew that. That is not an excuse. It is just accurate. There was an evening. I came home after a 12-hour shift, still in my uniform, and I started to say something. I cannot remember exactly what. Something about feeling as though I had quietly disappeared into the shape of our life. Something that was almost the truth. Daniel looked up from the television and said, "You love it, though. You have always been like that. You just keep going." He said it warmly. He meant it as a compliment. I closed my mouth. I went to bed. The next morning, I filled the thermos and drove Margaret to her appointment. Margaret asked me once, on one of those drives, whether I was all right. I said I was fine. Just a bit tired. She said, "He does not always see what is in front of him." She said it carefully, the way you say something about your own child when you know it is true and wish it were not. I said, "He is fine, Margaret. He is just busy." I believed that, or I chose to believe it. I am still not entirely sure which. He started taking cash out, £100, sometimes more, every week or two. He had never done that before. I noticed. I did not say anything. I was a nurse. I knew about catastrophizing. I did not want to be that person. There was a weekend in March. He said he was at a workaway day, Friday and Saturday, a town about an hour from home. He came back lighter than when he had left, as though something that had been pressing on him had quietly lifted. I thought he had simply had a good weekend. I covered a colleague's Saturday shift at short notice and came home early. He had said he would be in. He was not going into the office that day. He was not there. He came back 2 hours later and said he had gone for a walk. He said it without hesitation. I realized in that moment that the hesitation had already been practiced out of him. I did the accounts on the 1st of every month. Daniel did not. He never had. In October, I was going through the statements and I went back to look at the cash withdrawals, properly, with dates. They had started in February, £100, sometimes 120, every 10 days or so, like clockwork. I went back through the joint card, and there it was. One charge he had not covered with cash. A hotel, Friday and Saturday night, in a market town an hour away. The weekend, he had told me, was a workaway day. I looked up the hotel. It was not a conference hotel. It was small, quiet, the kind of place you book when you want to be uninterrupted. I did not spiral. I closed the laptop. I went to bed. I drove Margaret to her appointment that week and sat in the waiting room with her and read a 3-month-old magazine and did not say a word. She patted my hand when we stood up to leave. She did not know why. I think she sensed it anyway. I waited 9 days. Then, on a Thursday evening, I asked him. I asked him plainly, the way you ask someone a clinical question when you already suspect the answer and you need them to confirm it before you can proceed. He did not deny it. He was quiet for a moment, and then he told me there was someone. And then, and this is the part I have thought about many times since, he kept talking. He said he hadn't planned it. He said these things were complicated. He said he hoped, with time, I might understand. He was looking at me the way you look at someone when you are waiting for them to begin problem solving. He expected a negotiation. He had looked at the situation, and he had concluded that I would stay. Because I always stayed. Because I always handled things. Because I was, in the architecture of his life, the one who sorted it out. That was the moment I understood how long I had been invisible to him. Not unloved. Invisible. I went to bed. He stayed in the kitchen. I do not know for how long. I did not tell anyone for 5 days. I went to work. I did my shifts. I filled the thermos and drove Margaret to her appointments and talked about nothing in particular. On the 5th day, I called a solicitor. I had already done some reading. The inheritance I had put into the house. I had the original transfer documents, the bank records, the correspondence. Daniel thought of the house as his contribution. He had paid the larger share of the mortgage. That was true, and I had never disputed it. What he did not know was how much I still had. He had never asked. Not once, in 6 years, had he asked what remained of my father's estate. He had known I was comfortable. He had not thought it necessary to know the details. I had not volunteered them. A few nights later, while he slept, I went through his phone. He had not thought to lock it. I had a name. One careful search from there. I did not do it out of anger. I needed to know one thing, whether she knew he was married. She did not. She had believed they were, in her words, essentially separated, that I was self-contained, independent to the point of being distant, too absorbed in my work to be truly present in the marriage. Those were his words, passed through her. She had believed them because he had given her no reason not to. She was not his accomplice. She was another version of the same story, a woman who had been handed a carefully edited version of a man and had not been given enough information to question it. I felt, briefly, something I had not expected to feel. Solidarity is probably not quite the right word, but it was close to that. I told her the truth, all of it, plainly, and I wished her well, and I meant it. I do not know what she did with the information. That was no longer my concern. It was Margaret who called next, not him, his mother. She said, I knew something was wrong. I could feel it for months. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, every time you came to collect me, you had that flask ready and warm. In 4 years, he never once thought to do it himself. Not once. He never even asked how you knew what I took. She said, I am ashamed of him. I do not say that easily. He is my son, but I am ashamed of him. You deserved better than what he made of you. She did not need to say anything else. Neither did I. I loved someone who had stopped looking at me. And the moment I understood that, really understood it, in my bones, I stopped waiting for him to look. I left on a Saturday. I did not take much. Clothes, my nursing bag, my father's watch, which had sat on the bedside table for 6 years. He had worn it once to a dinner without asking. I had said nothing. He was my husband. He had simply reached for it. I took it back. The thermos I left on the counter. I did not need it where I was going. I was not going backward. The solicitor wrote to Daniel the following week. The inheritance contribution to the house was documented. The equity position was not what he had assumed. He called me 4 times that day. I let everyone go to voicemail. He had spent years not paying close attention to the details. I could not help him with that now. The savings, the account he had never asked about, were more than he had imagined. I was fine. I was, for the first time in longer than I could easily say, simply fine. I will not tell you I felt nothing in those first weeks. That would not be true. There were mornings when the anger was the first thing there, clean and certain, almost useful. But underneath it, and I have thought about this carefully, was something quieter. I had loved him, not the version of him that chose her, but the man who stood at a kitchen table and meant his thanks. That man had been real. Whatever displaced him, he had been real. And once I understood that clearly, I found I had nothing left to negotiate. That is enough. For right now, that is genuinely enough. One question before you go. There is a moment in this story when I called her, when I found out she had not known the truth either. What would you have done with that conversation? Would you have told her everything, the finances, the house, all of it, or would you have said nothing and simply walked away? I am genuinely curious about yours. If this is the kind of story you came here for, the ones people do not usually say out loud, subscribe. There is a new one every week.